So Dave Williams is our VP of Data Strategy at Analytics 8. He has a passion for helping our clients make smart decisions and building business-focused solutions. We also have a guest speaker from one of our clients today. Chase is the CTO at iFit, and he has nearly 20 years of technology experience. Chase has been instrumental in driving iFit from the initial conception and scaling it to a worldwide product used by millions across many brands, including NordicTrack, ProForm, Freemotion, and others. And it looks like he has some of those products there in his background. I'm really excited to have both Dave and Chase on today and for them to help tell iFit's story, a company, by the way, I personally love as a runner and a fitness enthusiast. So Dave and Chase are going to share how developing a data strategy and implementing a modern technology stack enabled iFit to keep pace with its growing data volume and take advantage of the virtual fitness industry. And just one last thing before we get started, Chase, if you want to change it to that orange slide. I do see a lot of familiar names on this webinar, so I know many of you are already aware of who Analytics 8 is, but for those who don't, Analytics 8 is a data analytics consulting company, and we help companies with the entire data and analytics lifecycle. So from strategy to implementation, so they can make sense of their data and use it to their strategic advantage. All right, at this point, I've been talking for way too long. I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Chase, and he will get us started.
Needed to unmute myself. All right, welcome, and thanks for joining us. Hopefully this can be informative for you guys. It sure was a great journey for us on kind of unlocking data. So really who we are, what is iFit, right? We like to think we're the world's most innovative fitness platform. You probably know a lot of our brands, including iFit, like NordicTrack, ProForm, Freemotion. We're the world's largest fitness manufacturer. And we do a lot of really innovative stuff and have for decades. And a big piece of that has been our iFit platform. And that's really, kind of our parent company to all of our those child brands, is driving that kind of interactive personal training. And you can imagine the data really plays a significant role in that, on driving engagement to our customers, on being able to take that data and productize it back to the customers, but really being able to deliver great insights to the business as, for investors or for growth plans. Everything like that really comes from our data. And so we really saw a need for that. And we focus on everything from the consumer, right? So we have a lot of consumer products. We ship around 10 million consumer pieces a year, and being able to get those across, all the countries in the world, basically, and being able to support them is a big part of our strategy. And so that's a little bit of who we are. Let's go on to the next slide here briefly. The problem of what we had. We started to hockey stick before COVID, and even more so during COVID, and we saw that our user base was just exploding, and it didn't show any signs of slowing down, and it hasn't. And we were just sitting on a ton of good data, like I talked about, of all of our consumer data, but we weren't using it to drive back to our consumers of that engagement. And we also had data just spread out everywhere through our organization, on people reporting on, like, what is a completed workout. For us, that's a big metric. And some groups would have one definition, another group would have another definition, and they'd report the same metric, and there'd be confusion across the organization, like, oh, well, what is it? And that was difficult to manage. And then as our key metrics that we're being kind of driving our business to were being added and evolving, it was taking too long to get those. Literally, some of those reports would take, weeks and weeks to get through because they were so in depth. You'll see at the end, that went from literally, sometimes, call it 8 weeks to get some really detailed reports to minutes now that we have the infrastructure in place. And we knew that something needed to be done. We didn't really have a great data strategy to start from the beginning, right? Like we didn't have a great foundation to build from. And so we knew we needed some help, right? And luckily, Dave was actually the first person I talked to at Analytics 8 and had an immediate connection. And I knew that they were going to be the organization to help us kind of drive and evolve our data strategy for a very sizable business, and do it quickly, right? Because we had no time to lose because of our growth rates. Dave, and this is a slide that Dave actually showed me in that first meeting. So maybe I'll hand it over to Dave for this one. Dave, is this your slide or mine?
Sure. Yeah, I can definitely talk to it, Chase. So this is one of the models that we've developed internally to kind of help our clients understand where they're at in terms of their analytics and data maturity. And this is something, as Chase said, that kind of resonated with him, to establish like what that kind of starting point was for them, which for a lot of organizations that we talk to really end up being in the chaotic and reactive stage. But more importantly than grading kind of where an organization is currently is anticipating where the organization wants to go or is able to go. Certainly with with a data strategy kind of laying the groundwork for it. And so this ends up being a helpful exercise to understanding what the roadmap can be. It starts the conversation around the art of the possible for an organization, and ends up being a helpful tool from that perspective. And so, Chase, I wonder if you're able to share kind of where you found iFit when we first had this conversation.
Yeah, this slide was the one that really popped to me from really that first discussion, because I really identified with it. And really, if I were to place us on that scale of where we started in kind of the downslope of chaotic, getting to reactive, right? Not a great place to be. And we're still evolving forward on this scale. We're not all the way to the very right, but I think we're on the upslope of managed now, where we're starting to use that to drive, and we're starting to cycle really quickly into these further phases of kind of this data maturity. And that transition from chaotic to managed, getting that foundation, was really critical. And it's taken us probably close to 9 months of really kind of this effort. But if you look at the foundation we've laid and how solid it is and how it sets up for these future managed and proactive type of things, it really is the foundation we needed and an incredibly fast result for 9 months.
Yeah, there's been great progress that you've made over the last 9 months, and we're happy to have played a role in that, Chase. We could probably progress to the next slide. So, as Chase mentioned, I was the first person that had the opportunity to talk to Chase and really understand what some of the challenges were at iFit. And so what I heard was that Chase was having trouble kind of effectively and efficiently using the data that they had in-house, right? You heard him say that data was spread all over. He had a lot of data, but didn't necessarily know how to harness it and use it for insight. So there are some limitations there in terms of data analysis and providing visibility into the growth, not just that iFit was growing, but what was causing iFit to grow, right? What were the levers, so to speak, that were influencing that growth? And so as we started down the path, what we realized we needed to do to help them was kind of sit on their side of the table, so to speak. So see their business from their perspective. So we engaged in some conversations to build a data strategy. So we started with understanding what their challenges were, what their pain points were in their current state. Why were they getting hung up in certain areas of the business, and how might data play a bigger role in the organization and in their growth? And speaking of growth, one of the things that we asked is what growth really looked like to iFit. How did they measure growth, and did they have the right lead measures to influence the trajectory of that growth? And then we also looked at their internal capabilities, for example, around working with data. We looked at the quality of the data and so forth. And so Chase understood that a data strategy, or the process of building a data strategy, is not just a technical exercise, that ultimately an effective roadmap needs to incorporate other factors such as people and process alongside technology. So we asked Chase to look at some specific elements. So what we talked about employees a minute ago. So what did they need so that they were empowered to look at the data? What were some processes that needed to be in place to ensure that data was accessible and high quality? Of course, we looked at technology, what they needed to have in place, not just to do the basic assessments or the basic analysis of data, but also thinking a little bit longer term around getting to a much more advanced use of data. And so that was the process of looking at or creating a data strategy. And so we can then probably flip to the next slide, Chase. So coming out of that assessment period, then, we built that roadmap for them, or that data strategy, which is really, you can think of it like a detailed plan to help an organization mature their analytics capabilities. So we wanted to help move them from, looking at data just from a hindsight perspective to having some foresight. Instead of just looking at what happened, looking at asking more impactful questions around how to make a certain outcome happen. So we looked at the pain points and the things that were holding them back. Chase mentioned a few of those already, and we found some opportunities for some improved maturity. And those opportunities then looked like a kind of a laundry list of recommendations, which we then worked with Chase to put into a plan. We prioritized those recommendations and sequenced them, organized them, so that there was a roadmap in place. Chase mentioned that it's been multiple months now, and so slowly but surely we've put those that solution in place and have been able to build on it. But it was really based on the strategy roadmap that allowed us to take that approach. And Chase, before I turn it over to you, or turn it back over to you, I do want to highlight that the number of things that you and your colleagues have done really well as part of this process. So, of course, it would be fun for me to try to take all the credit about the great work that we've done for iFit. But at the end of the day, having Chase and his team participate so in depth in the process, they of course have their day-to-day jobs that they're also managing, but for them to be forthcoming and to be open about their challenges and about where they wanted to go, and to make the decisions as quickly as Chase and his team were able to do, were critical factors in allowing us to make as much progress as a joint team over the last 9+ months. So Chase, you deserve a lot of credit, and I'm excited for you to talk through some of the technical components here of the solution that we helped put in place. So I'll turn it back over to you.
And and speaking of our team, we started with a team really of one, and Analytics 8 came in and it kind of helped set the standards, the procedures, the policies, the cadence that we then built up a fairly significant team around, and they're going to become more self-sufficient, right? And Analytics 8 has been a great partner in kind of not only building the product but the team. I think has been a big aspect of this, where they've been a big help on that. So for the technology, kind of what we selected there, kind of a lot of our data, Shopify, SAP, Mongo, Google Play, Postgres, those are kind of our traditional data sources. But then we also have kind of our marketing data sources like Google AdWords, AdRoll, Twitter, Facebook, kind of the tertiary data that's not necessarily like core to our platform, but like we get customer engagement data from that we can suck into our platform. And we decided to use an ETL tool named Fivetran. And good and bad on that, that we don't have to build it all. The bad is it's not a perfect tool, but it's done really well for our needs of ELTing that data over into Snowflake. And I think the two big technology winners for us, really, let me say three, is Snowflake, dbt, and Looker. Snowflake, because it was just so easy to set up, stand up, suck so much data in so quickly. The team understood it quickly. We didn't have the scaling issues like we had on Redshift. We've been able to kind of, that decoupling of compute and storage was a big deal for us. It was pretty transparent on that. Then we got into kind of the dbt layer, and dbt was fantastic because it helped us put everything into code and pipelines. And I think we're going to talk about that in a minute as well. And then finally into Looker, which was our BI tool, which gave us a better way of breaking down those data silos. So everyone was looking at live data from the same data warehouse, and being able to just run that with real data was a significant win for us. So Snowflake, diving into that a little bit more, we got everything into a big central data warehouse. We were able to separate that, secure it. PII is a big thing for us of protecting that data, securing that data. So we're having pipelines to where only certain engineers are allowed full access to PII data. And then after that certain staging layer, things get masked and anonymized in downstream things. And then that allowed more, by doing that and having better control permissions, that allowed for more access and democratization of that data. And also because we were able to get all of that in there quickly with great data warehouse, we're able to scale that, be agile, pivot on that, and just copy, share that data really quickly. Ingesting the data for the organization, huge amounts of data, and just brought them in. And we had some shadow marks with the organization, kind of referenced that earlier, where kind of individuals had their own databases that they were managing for a subset of a product line or other things like that. And we were getting mixed data results from everywhere. Getting rid of those shadow marks and unifying it was a really significant win. DBT, I think, might be the engineering team's favorite tool. Really because with everything stored in that central location, we could use DBT to kind of switch that ETL to an ELT load, where we suck that data in, and then we have in code checked in with code reviews, with CI/CD and pipelines to be able to take that data and apply the rigor of software development to that data. So everyone doesn't have their, everyone before had kind of like their Swiss Army knife that they would pull out of like their different scripts they would run, or they would have like their different spreadsheets that they would kind of bring things in and pivot on, or like everyone had their own set of tools. By bringing all of that into DBT, it centralizes it, standardizes it, and shares it with the team. And so that is where kind of the big gains of that months to days kind of took place right there. Documentation, data lineage was huge. Being able to generate that automatically and kind of see, where this field goes all the way up, and driving field level documentation on all of our data. So we have really good data hygiene and understanding of the data. And all of that built confidence in our data. Without confidence in the data, then it's useless to the business, right? Because then people are like, well, I trust my gut more than the data. Well, it's like, well, then why are we doing all this stuff with data? You need to build that organizational trust and sell that to the other parts of the organization. And it needs to be accurate, right? To have that trust, and it needs to be quick, and it needs to be better than what they can do, to have that adoption rate internally. And finally, it kind of bridged the gap between our data and our analyst or business units, because they were able to, and there was some friction there, right? Oh, well, the data is different for us. Well, it just makes it transparent, and it eliminated all of that friction. And then we kind of had this place in the middle, and we actually used Confluence for this because that's kind of our internal documentation source, where for like KPIs, right? Like, what is a completed workout? We have those different definitions. Everyone had different understanding of that. Different data silos, different results. Getting an agreed business definition of that, getting it centralized and then canonized and saying, this is what we're pointing to. And anybody asks you what this KPI or this metric means, great, let me point you to this document right here that walks you through what the objective of it is, all the calculations that go into it, the different pieces that we're segmenting out of it, if there's different business reasons for that, and drove clarity in the business for understanding on that. And that really lied back then. So there's this kind of higher level of the KPI definitions that then the team for the data science or the data team can dive deeper into the field level documentation for the data teams. But really the business teams don't really care about the field level docs. They care about the KPIs and getting those aligned organizationally. So that was a non-technical solution that had a huge impact of just getting our data definitions aligned. And then piping all that into a visual way to help drive the business in a performance, KPI standards, reporting, all of that is Looker. We have it centralized, governed, and trusted. We're able to use Looker to create all of our analytics, but drill down into that data and explore that data. which we couldn't do before. Actionable insights on that, share that to other portions of the organization, and be able to grow with that. And we've already started to spin out more and more dashboards, and they really are, I mean, driving our business. That's what the executive team looks at every day. That's what our, our engagement teams and more teams are now positioning themselves to use this to drive their lines of business. And then finally, kind of the results of this whole project is we got clean embedded data and logic that the teams have confidence in. That can't be understated, that of having clean data that they have confidence in. And it's not perfect, right? Like there's always data that is a little finicky that you got to work around, and new data coming in, and how do you reconcile those? But the good thing is that we have a process and a system where there's that lineage, there's the centralized documentation that unifies and drives that confidence for further iterations. Looker drives all of our primary consumer KPIs and our investor reporting, business, reporting I kind of talked about on the previous slide. Turnaround changed from months to minutes. That was a huge win, right? We can pivot those a lot quicker now. Aligned upstream parts of the org to the importance of data as a design consideration, right? From the product side, from the engineering side, and pushing that upstream, is still a process, right? Of getting, the data team involved in the product definition, right? And part of that product life cycle is important, but we've started, a lot more headway on that than we have in the past. Getting actionable data out to our engagement efforts for our engagement teams, right? Like, somebody completed their we have a milestone challenge right now that's really, really popular, where people do 50 workouts, they get a t-shirt, 100 workouts, and eventually they get that flag that's behind me back there, that iFit flag, and all these different rewards that we send out to people. But engaging them and motivating them through that is largely driven from our data warehouse now. And so, those are actionable and meaningful impacts to the business. And then we're starting to roll this. We really focused first on our consumer data. Kind of the next bite of the elephant is all of our enterprise data. And then the next up, and this kind of goes back to that data maturity scale that Dave mentioned, of marching through that, is now that we have the data foundation, we have the clean data, the pipelines, all of that good stuff, we can start to push that data more meaningfully into our ML models and use that to drive product innovation back to the consumer. So more than just engaging them, more than just reporting on them, we're now creating new products based on their performance that are individualized to them based on machine learning models because of this pipeline. And then finally, I feel like we're in a case where we can adapt, right? Where we're not putting out fires, and we're adapting to the new and pushing into the new. So overall, a great engagement, and I've been very lucky to have Analytics 8 to help drive that and be our partner through the whole process.
Yeah, well, that's great, Chase. Thank you so much for taking us through that. And I've got a couple questions that have come in, but I want to also highlight to everybody on the call, if there's specific questions that you want to ask of Chase, just throw them in the chat box, and we'll get to them here. But Chase, I want to lead off with one question around the months to minutes change that you've seen in terms of getting access to data or getting a report. Because I'll be honest, when I see that type of headline, published by a BI tool, I kind of roll my eyes.
Right.
But so I wonder, I mean, if you can talk more about that, and like, is that real? Like, is that,
yeah, it was absolutely, it's the shadow warehouse, the shadow data marts, right? And because we'd have, if we wanted to get like a drill down on a specific software number, but we also needed to like proportionally rate that with sales numbers from the enterprise side, but also marry that with some like the product SKU and like the bill of materials, and then marry that with the consumer data. We're dealing with like 3 different data sets that weren't modeled, right? And so when we are taking and we're taking our analysts and saying, hey, analyst, go answer this question, they were just running into brick walls because, okay, well, first I need to get access to the data. And that's hard because there's not centralized and governed. And then they're running into problems of like, well, how does this data relate to each other? How do we model this data together? And then finally they're able to start getting to answering questions after kind of these hurdles that go through multiple times for each of those.
Yeah, so have you seen a noticeable change then in the data culture or becoming kind of a data-driven organization?
Very much so. You know, and that's still a journey, right? People still trust their guts to some degree, but that like people understand that the KPIs are what matter, and driving to those is you know what our goals are increasing those, and so they're using that to make decisions and drive to that. Good
to hear. So I wonder if you can talk. One of the questions that I frequently get, Chase, from organizations that I speak to is around how to bring about this type of change to their organizations. So how to sell it within the organization, maybe to executives, maybe to business leaders, etc. I wonder if you can, kind of share how you did that, because you are the champion from our perspective, but certainly you had to align with other leaders within iFit. So can you share any details on how you did that?
Yeah. You know, I'd say there's probably three parts to that. Is one, you need to have someone in the company that's a champion, right? That like is a real believer in data, right? That can go and fight those battles and has enough sway and impact that they can drive those discussions, right? So that's a critical piece. Second is then, I think that the initial assessment that we did with Analytics 8, where we spent, I think it was 6 weeks going through interviewing stakeholders, asking what the KPIs were, asking what data they wanted, that helped drive understanding from, because sometimes, it takes an external person to kind of walk you through it, and they're like, oh yeah, I get it, of leading that through and saying, oh yeah, like I do need these numbers. This is exactly what I want. How would I get to that? Oh, I could put that in a dashboard. That was a really big thing. And then probably the third thing I'd say would be kind of lining out for the business, that data is the game, right? Like if you get left behind in data now, I mean, you're getting left behind on social. What was so, when social first came, or when .com first came, right? Like there's evolutions in the marketplace that happen. Data is one of those evolutions, and kind of lining it out clearly for people that like, this is what's going to drive our business into the future, not just of operating our business, but driving it back to the consumers, is kind of eye-opening for people. And so those would be the three things that I think help.
Oh, that's great, Chase. Thank you. That's really helpful. So one question that came in from Andy, a participant here. So you mentioned earlier moving from Redshift to Snowflake, I think, and just want to put that in the context, or put that in the the evolution of your maturity. So was that shift kind of early in the process, like around chaotic and reactive, or later in terms of your maturity?
Yeah, and to be fair, we probably could have utilized Redshift in a lot of the ways that we're using Snowflake now. It just was a lot harder to do, right? Like and it made it a lot more chaotic for us, at least for us on Redshift. And maybe it's because we weren't Redshift experts, right? That might be the case. But anytime we needed to scale, right? That seemed to be the thing we'd always run into, is we'd have significant queries or new data coming in, and we'd have to scale up the database, right? And for memory, for compute, whatever, and like doing that is not an insignificant thing on Redshift, right? Like you have to kind of stop the cluster, spin up, upgrade it, and it kind of halts things for a little bit. And so with Snowflake, okay, like we've never had that issue, and we've been able to just pipe data into that so quickly and so fast that it's never been an issue, and we're handling probably 20 times the data that we ever had in Redshift without breaking a sweat.
Yeah, that's great. That's amazing. So question from Ryan around whether the strategy partnership between iFit and Analytics 8 was conducted remotely. Was it on site? Were there any constraints that that working remotely or working through COVID brought into the process? Any complications from your perspective?
Yeah. I think we started this right after COVID. I'm pretty sure it was. It was probably 2 months after kind of lockdowns started, that Dave and I kind of met and started kicking things off. So this was all during the swing of COVID. So I've actually never met Dave. I've never met anyone on the Analytics 8 team, and I don't think that they've ever in person met anyone on our teams. So it's been 100% digital, remote, a lot of Zoom calls, to be, candid. I mean, we just get on a lot of Zoom calls and learn how to work with each other. Luckily, our organization, we were remote very heavily for the last 9 years already. So it's just kind of the way we work. Our teams are distributed. And so it was just natural to bring in Analytics 8 as an augmentation to that team in a remote way. But it was important to get them integrated into our team's communication paths, right? For us, using Zoom, right? Because that's the tool of choice for our video calls, and that the teams could join in really easily. Slack, getting them in on Slack very quickly so they could be part of the team and message really quickly. And then lastly would be on like our Atlassian cloud type stuff of Confluence, Jira, getting into our project management stuff, really bringing them in closely and restricted access, but like still using our tools and bringing it as part of our process, I think made that a win.
Yeah, and you have, like you said, plenty of employees who are distributed, or at least have been distributed, and that's kind of part of your operating model, right? And part of your culture.
Yep. Yeah, like 99% of our engineering teams are distributed around the US.
Yeah, great. So final question for me then, and kind of last call for our audience. Chase, I wonder if you can talk about like where you're going. You mentioned some kind of predictive use cases, and you mentioned moving from kind of consumer to more kind of back end or operational type of data. But what are you envisioning now in terms of data and analytics at iFit? Like what's kind of your next big challenge or next big accomplishment that you're gearing up for?
Yeah. So, and there's still a lot of kind of gold to mine in the analytics area that we still need to go and get after. But I think the next phase that we're now maturing into and starting to really look very, we have a lot of engagements around this already, but really investing heavily in is moving into the data science side of it. And using that to fuel our products, from, not only just, like recommending like you would in the Netflix show, but like controlling you throughout your entire workout based on your heart rate or other features that are all driven by ML. And so that's the next step for us is data science.
Great. Interesting. Good stuff. So that is about it then in terms of the presentation. But Chase, I just want to thank you for your willingness to share your story. As consultants, like we can talk all day, and I still think what's most interesting to our audience and our followers on LinkedIn and so forth is hearing our customer stories and hearing like how they've evolved, how it's impacted them. That ends up being just really impactful, and I've got no doubt, just having listened to you today, that what you've shared is going to be impactful and educational for a lot of people. So, really,
it's my pleasure.
Yeah, great, thank you, Tracy.
Yes, I echo Dave's statements. Thanks again, Chase, and thanks Dave too for presenting as well. So, just a quick couple closing comments here. So I hope that everyone did enjoy the presentation. Just to let everyone know, I will be sending a follow-up email that contains the link to the recording to the session today and a couple of other resources that you might find helpful. Then when I send that email, you'll also have my contact information if you want to reach out to me. I always say this, but I am a real person, even though you can't see me. So if you do email me, I will respond if you have any questions. And if you like this webinar and our content, make sure to sign up for our newsletter. That link will also be in the email we'll send out. So we send out this newsletter monthly. It contains all the information on upcoming events, blogs, and all that kind of stuff. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude our session. Thanks again so much for joining, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.